Have you ever made someone a promise? A simple deal. You do your part and I'll do mine. And then you watch, in real time, as they take that goodwill, that chance you offered them, and they light it on fire. This is the story of Private Wiggles, a soldier who was given a golden ticket out of the Army with her dignity intact. And it's the story of how her spectacular, self-destructive spiral taught her a brutal lesson in consequences. Strap in. This is a masterclass in fuck around and find out military style. If you know the burning frustration of watching someone sabotage their own life while dragging you down with them, hit that like button right now. If you crave stories where the arrogant finally get what's coming to them, subscribe. Because today's tale isn't just about revenge. It's about the slow, meticulous, and perfectly legal application of pressure until a problem pops. The air in Hawaii always felt thick with possibility. Salt, flowers, the promise of paradise. But command is different. It's weight. The moment I took over that unit of 80 soldiers, their well-being, their careers, their lives became a responsibility I carried in my chest. Most of them made that way to privilege. They were sharp, resilient. Then there was the 80-20 rule. That 20% who consume 80% of your energy. My introduction to Private Wiggles wasn't a formal meeting. It was a quiet, worried briefing from my platoon sergeant Maggie. A month-long training exercise to Thailand was looming. And Wiggles? She just had an outpatient medical procedure. The words were careful, professional. The implication hung there. She might not be fit to go. I believed in talking to my soldiers directly. No filters. I found Wiggles. Are you going to be okay to travel? To train? She looked me right in the eye. It's not a problem, sir. I can handle it. There was a defiance there already, a challenge I didn't yet understand. I took her at her word. That was my first mistake. Thailand was a controlled chaos of setting up camp. And 2 days in, the call came. Medical tent. Wiggles. The physician assistant, a man who'd seen battlefield trauma, pulled me aside. His voice was low, clinically impressed. Pelvic inflammatory disease. Worst I've ever seen. From untreated STIs. She also disclosed a recent abortion. There was no judgment in his tone, only stark facts. The infection was catastrophic, but treatable. High-dose antibiotics. A solution in a bottle. We released her to her section sergeant, Deb, with strict orders to administer the meds. A day later, Deb found me and First Sergeant Bob. Her face was pure exhaustion. She's refusing the antibiotics, sir. And she says she wants out of the Army. Here's where I made my offer. The good faith deal. I called Wiggles in. The medical tent smelled of antiseptic and damp canvas. You want out? You know you've got time left on your contract. Her reply was flat. I'm done. I just want out. I leaned forward. This was the off-ramp. Okay, I can do that. I don't want someone here who doesn't want to be here. I'll start the paperwork for an honorable discharge the second we're back in Hawaii. But you have to meet me halfway. You take your meds. You do your job. You be where you're supposed to be. You do your part, I'll do mine. Do we have a deal? A flicker in her eyes. Not gratitude. Something colder. Yep, I can do that. She couldn't do that. What followed was a symphony of neglect and rebellion. Sergeant Deb became a medication bounty hunter, tracking down a ghost who was never where she was supposed to be. Then, the accusation against First Sergeant Bob, a claim of misconduct so easily disproven it was laughable, had it not been so vicious. It was a flare shot into the sky. I am a weapon of chaos. Return to Hawaii felt like bringing back a lit fuse. I started the honorable discharge paperwork, naive enough to think the worst was over. I was so wrong. This was when the true opera of self-destruction began. Let me paint the scenes for you. Rapid fire, the underage drinking, the forged housing documents with her soon-to-be dishonorably discharged, drug-dealing husband, her showing up to sick call with a boot print on her face, a gift from said husband, the vanishing acts for days on end, the slashed tires, the knife fight, the twisted domestic drama that played out like a bad crime show. My sergeant, pale-faced, using my open-door policy to tell me he'd seen her, and another soldier from my unit, stripping at a club in Honolulu. The bewildering call from a temp agency, asking if it was okay for her to have a secretarial job on the side. It was a daily torrent of stupidity. The 80-20 rule was now the 95-5 rule. My time, my energy, my command's focus was being consumed by a single walking catastrophe. The honorable discharge packet hit the shredder. My sympathy evaporated, replaced by a cold, focused clarity. She'd been offered a path of least resistance and chose to bushwhack through a minefield instead. Fine. You want to get stupid? I can get stupider. I switched tracks to a special court-martial. My legal advisor was pragmatic. She'll probably get fined, maybe a couple weeks confinement, and other than honorable discharge. Her actions are more pathetic than sinister. I understood, but then he offered the key. A quiet, legal gem. She meets all 5 conditions for pretrial confinement in the brig. If you articulate them to the magistrate, she could wait for her trial behind bars. A plan crystallized, cold and perfect. Not revenge out of anger, but consequence, administered with precision. I studied those 5 conditions until I could recite them in my sleep. Danger to others, flight risk, etc. At the pre-trial hearing, I laid them out detail by damning detail. The magistrate's gavel fell. Confinement approved. The Navy brig at Ford Island. The image is seared in my mind. First Sergeant Bob and Platoon Sergeant Maggie at her base housing door. The muffled sounds from inside unmistakable. They waited, awkwardly, until the festivities concluded. She took her sweet time showering before finally sauntering out. The sheer, breathtaking audacity. Off to her new, frosty accommodations. For 4 weeks, there was peace. Glorious, profound peace. My required weekly welfare visits. To the brig were a study in absurdity. Yes, I had to ensure my soldier wasn't being mistreated. Every time the air was freezing. And every time, Wiggles had a new story. The pinnacle was when my skeptical boss, Lieutenant Colonel Ryan, accompanied me. Wiggles laid it on thick about a painful feeling. Motrin just isn't working, sir. The concern on LTC Ryan's face was genuine, until the brig guard, barely containing a smirk, set him straight. Sir, she's been asking to get her wisdom teeth out for 2 weeks. There's no filling. I watched the transformation on my boss's face, from concern to molten fury. He spat the words. That bitch lied to me. The alliance was sealed. Then the twist. The brig called. Wiggles was pregnant. Of course she was. The pre-confinement activity had consequences. Regulations forced her release back to us. Her defense attorney, Captain Morgan, the one who condescended to me with his "this isn't my first rodeo" line, pleaded. He'd take personal responsibility for her behavior. He wanted a deal. Time served in the OTH discharge. My legal counsel advised taking it. The revenge was already hers. A month in the brig, a permanent black mark, no benefits. We brought her back, confining her to barracks for her final 9 days. It was like unleashing a tornado in a broom closet. Smoking, drinking hypnotic, sneaking out. And the final gift from her departed husband, a front door display of stolen body armor, ammunition, even explosives. A blatant attempt to frame her. I called her in for one last talk. My executive officer, L.T. Rickey, stood witness. Wiggles, I said, my voice calm, dead calm. You're violating your release agreement. You're drinking, smoking, sneaking out. She cut me off with a sarcastic sneer. Yeah, and doing all kinds of drugs too. I didn't rise to it. I went lower. I looked at her, this pregnant, self-immolating young woman, and I spoke the coldest, most factual truth I could muster. You're aware you're pregnant again. Most fetal damage from substances occurs in the first few weeks. I don't know if you plan to keep it, but at this rate, that baby's going to be born dumber than you. The air left the room. Her face went slack, jaw literally hanging open. She looked like a gaff fish. Then, with a strangled sound, she bolted. She sprinted to Lieutenant Colonel Ryan's office to tattle. L.T. Rickey sprinting after her. I sat in my office. I wasn't worried. I'd spoken the truth. Sometimes truth is the sharpest knife. The fallout was immediate. LTC Ryan eviscerated Captain Morgan over phone, and soon my phone rang. Baka, 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 Morgan began, the patronizing tone trying to mask panic. I'm shocked, just shocked you would use that language. I cut him off. My mother was a lawyer. I knew the script, and I bet you're appalled and dismayed, too. He stammered. The wind was gone from his sails. What will it take to keep the deal? He finally whispered. Get her on a plane tomorrow. He managed by Sunday. We appointed L.T. Ricky as a personal escort. He walked her onto that plane, waited until the wheels were up. We watched that island disappear behind her. A problem finally, irrevocably exported. The revenge wasn't in the yelling. It wasn't in the brig. Even, it was in the pristine, bureaucratic perfection of it all. It was in Captain Morgan's humble voice. It was in the other-than-honorable stamp that would haunt every job application, barring her from VA benefits for life. It was in the month of her life spent in a freezing cell for no reason other than her own choices. I had offered her a hand up. She chose to dig a hole. So I handed her a shovel, and then I stood back and watched her bury herself. The system, when correctly activated, is a relentless, impersonal machine. I simply showed her the on switch. 2 other soldiers came to me later, wanting out. They followed the rules. They got honorable discharges, benefits, a clean slate. It was easy. Wiggles' path was always there for her. Some people are just architects of their own ruin. They look at a bridge offered and choose to swim through sharks instead. My job wasn't to save her from herself. It was to protect the unit from her. And sometimes, protecting your people means letting one burn themselves out, safely contained, far away from everyone else. If that slow, steady burn of justice warms something in your soul, smash that like button. It lets me know you value stories where actions meet their exact consequences. Tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying case of FAFO you've ever witnessed? And subscribe, because we got plenty more stories where the arrogant get exactly what they've earned.